The conference room was packed with executives in crisp suits, laughter echoing through the marble halls. In the corner, pushing a squeaky mop bucket, was Harold, the janitor everyone overlooked. But that day, the CEO didn't just ignore him. He publicly humiliated him in front of the entire board, mocking his clothes, his job, and even his skin. Harold stayed silent, his hands trembling. But what no one knew was that in less than 24 hours, one phone call would flip the power balance upside down. By the next morning, the CEO would be escorted out of his own company. Harold Jackson had been a fixture in the towering glass headquarters for over 20 years. He knew every corner of the building, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, lobby, the hum of printers on the 12th floor, the way the sun hit the boardroom windows just before noon. To most employees, Harold was invisible. He wasn't on the payroll of important people, but he kept their world running, mopping floors before dawn, fixing clogged restrooms, making sure the building shone before the executives arrived. He was meticulous in his work, wearing his well-pressed blue janitor's uniform every day, polished shoes, and a gentle smile for anyone who acknowledged him. Outside work, Harold was a devoted father and grandfather, active in his church and known in his neighborhood for helping people without expecting anything in return. He lived humbly, but with dignity, never feeling the need to prove himself to those who judged by appearance. The company itself was a massive corporate empire run by its flashy, hard-nosed CEO, Richard Vaughn. Richard was known for his ruthless business tactics, but also for his arrogance. To him, employees were tools, and those in lowly positions didn't even register as human in his eyes. On a Tuesday morning, an unexpected turn of events brought Harold into the executive boardroom. He wasn't there for a meeting, just to mop the floor after a coffee spill. But as he pushed open the glass door, every head turned. Some smirked. Richard Vaughn, standing at the head of the table, noticed Harold and decided to turn him into the day's entertainment. What Harold didn't know was that this single moment of public humiliation would trigger a chain of events neither he nor Richard could ever take back. As Harold quietly rolled his mop bucket into the boardroom, he kept his eyes down, determined to clean the spill quickly without disturbing the meeting. But Richard Vaughn, leaning casually against the conference table, saw an opportunity for a cruel display. "Look at this," Richard roared to his executives, gesturing toward Harold. "Even the janitors get a front-row seat these days. I guess standards are slipping." The room erupted in chuckles. Harold froze for a moment, his back stiffening. He wasn't new to offhand comments. Subtle slights had been part of his working life for decades. But this was different. Richard wasn't whispering to a colleague. He was broadcasting his disdain for all to hear. "You missed a spot," Richard continued, pointing to the floor near Harold's feet. "I know cleaning is your specialty, but try to get it right. After all, this is our headquarters, not some back alley." The words cut deep. They weren't just about his job. They were about who Harold was, or rather, who Richard believed. He was someone unworthy of respect because of his role, his uniform, and the color of his skin. The laughter from the executives grew louder, bouncing off the glass walls. Harold swallowed hard, willing himself not to react. He'd learned long ago that his silence was often the safest choice. He finished mopping, nodded politely, and left the room without a word. But the humiliation didn't end there. Word of the incident spread through the building within hours. Some employees avoided Harold entirely, embarrassed by him. Others whispered their pity when they thought he couldn't hear. To Richard, it was just another power play, another reminder of his untouchable position. That evening, Harold sat alone in his small kitchen, staring at his untouched dinner. His daughter, Melanie, stopped by with her 2 kids. Immediately, sensing something was wrong. Though Harold didn't go into detail, Melanie was sharp. She'd seen her father endure indignities before, but this time she could see the weight of it on his shoulders. As she listened, A quiet resolve formed in her mind. Her father was humble and soft-spoken, but he was also respected far beyond the walls of that office building. What Richard didn't know, and what Harold never talked about at work, was that Melanie's godfather, Clarence Dupree, was a highly influential figure in the corporate world. He was a major shareholder in the very company Richard ran, and someone who had known Harold since childhood. Later that night, Melanie made a call. She didn't raise her voice or demand revenge. She simply told Clarence what had happened, every detail, every word Richard had said. There was a long silence on the other end before Clarence replied, his tone icy. "Leave it to me." Harold went to bed that night unaware of what was already in motion. The next morning, while Richard prepared for another day of running his empire, a very different kind of meeting was being arranged, one that would determine his future. Vaughn arrived at the office the next morning in his usual fashion, stepping out of a sleek black car, sunglasses on, exuding the kind of confidence that came from years of unchecked power. He had no idea that in a private boardroom, a gathering was taking place without his invitation. The company's largest shareholders sat around a long mahogany table. At the head sat Clarence Dupree, his presence commanding even without raising his voice. Documents lay neatly stacked in front of each member, printed evidence of Richard's questionable leadership, declining employee morale, and now a public relations nightmare waiting to explode. The humiliation of a long-serving black employee, witnessed by an entire executive team, was not just morally indefensible. It was a potential scandal that could tank the company's image overnight. When Richard finally strode into the building, he was met not with greetings, but with two security officers waiting by the elevator. Confused and slightly irritated, he brushed them off, trying to make his way upstairs. But one of them stepped forward, handing him an envelope. Inside was a single-page notice. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as Chief Executive Officer." His eyes scanned the words again and again, disbelief turning into anger. He demanded to know who authorized it, only to hear Clarence's name. Richard barged into the boardroom, but the atmosphere was cold and final. Clarence didn't shout. He simply explained, in calm, deliberate tones, that the board had lost faith in Richard's ability to lead, and that his behavior toward Harold had been the final straw. The incident had been confirmed by multiple witnesses. The decision was unanimous. In less than 15 minutes, the man who had once ruled the building was escorted out, his designer briefcase clutched tightly in one hand, sunglasses hiding his eyes. Outside, employees watched from the lobby as the elevator doors closed. Harold, quietly cleaning the far end of the hallway, caught a glimpse of the scene. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply kept working, his dignity intact, knowing the balance of power had shifted in a way Richard could never undo. News of Richard Vaughn's sudden removal spread through the company like wildfire. Rumors flew, but the truth was whispered, in break rooms and passed in quiet conversations. The CEO had been fired after humiliating Harold. The janitor, who had worked there longer than most executives, had been alive. Some employees felt an odd mix of shock and satisfaction. For years, Richard's arrogance had been a source of tension, but no one had dared to challenge him. Now, his downfall had come not from a corporate rival or financial blunder, but from disrespecting the one man who had never asked for anything but respect in return. Harold went about his day as usual. He still mopped the floors, emptied trash, bins, and greeted the reception staff with his gentle nod. But something in the air had shifted. People looked him in the eye more. They greeted him with genuine warmth instead of polite dismissal. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. A week later, Clarence paid a quiet visit to the building. He shook Harold's hand firmly and thanked him, not for causing Richard's removal, but for carrying himself with grace in the face of cruelty. "You reminded them," Clarence said softly, "that a title doesn't make you more human than..." the next person. Harold never asked for revenge, and he never spoke of the incident again. But his story spread beyond the company. Local news outlets picked it up, framing it as a reminder of the dignity and value of every worker, regardless of role, race, or background. In the weeks that followed, the company implemented new ethics and respect training for all employees, including executives. It was a small step, but it signaled change. Harold's life didn't become glamorous, and he didn't suddenly climb the corporate ladder. But in his quiet way, he had altered the culture of an entire organization. Sometimes, the most powerful victories come without a single word spoken. And sometimes, the downfall of the mighty begins with the mistreatment of someone they thought could never fight back. So the question remains, how many people in power still haven't learned that lesson? And when they finally do, will it be too late?